the premiere episode of the Power to Be show. You have the power to be connected, the power to be creative, and the power to be courageous. Dr. Terrell Bird, internationally renowned author, pastor, and professor, created this series to inspire and encourage congregations to see more deeply the relationship between Sunday worship and the work week. Along with our guest for today, he is one of the city network leaders for Made to Flourish, an organization that believes pastors play an essential part in God's mission to see churches and communities flourish by valuing what people do outside of church on Sundays. Our guest today is Pastor Keith Case. Keith serves as lead pastor of Memorial Presbyterian Church, a 100-year-old church in West Palm Beach, and at Providentia West Palm Beach, a church plant started in 2015. He's been serving as an ordained minister around South Florida for the last 12 years. Keith and his wife, Amy, have 5 children. Together, Pastor Bird and Pastor Case will discuss the need for small business incubators, Made to Flourish, and the focus of Power to Be. Before we get started, we would like to thank this episode's sponsor, Living Word Christian Community, located at 2390 South Military Trail, West Palm Beach, Florida, 33415. Our worship service begins each Sunday at 10:30 a.m. in person, on Instagram and Facebook Live. And Dr. Terrell Bird is also the lead pastor. We'll now get to our show.
We are delighted to have you join us as we have a conversation about the integration of faith and work. I am especially delighted because I have a very good friend, and I can say that we are co-laborers together. We have been working together now for 3 years on this team, this national organization called Made to Flourish. So I'm happy to have Pastor Keith Case as a guest on our show today, and I look forward to the conversation that we will have. And I say to you, our audience, I think that you will be blessed by this conversation as well. So we are going to begin our conversation with Pastor Keith Case. Pastor, first of all, as a friend, we have now been rolling together for a little while.
Yes, we have.
But what I want to do is to kind of let the audience know, what is it about the integration of faith and work that inspires you to work in this area?
Well, thank you for having me here, Dr. Bird.
Good to have you.
I always make the joke with Dr. Bird that, he's my celebrity friend. If you live here in West Palm Beach, you'll see him on billboards here. In our little network with Made to Flourish, they have coffee cups now with quotes from Dr. Bird on the coffee cups. So I live in Dr. Bird's shadow a little bit,
goodness,
but it's a good shadow to live in.
Oh,
So,
right. No, actually, he's helping to pull the shadow.
Oh man,
he is. So
I'm telling you, but even coming here today, it's like, just the level of professionalism that you guys are bringing to this issue, the investment you guys are making, it's really encouraging and it's inspiring.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to be here. Excited to see where this all goes. Excited to be a part of it here in the very beginning.
Yes.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So hopefully I'll be back.
Oh yes. Oh, absolutely.
This is like being on, Jimmy Kimmel or
well, we're
one of the late night shows. I feel special and important being here with you. So,
we don't have to pay you, do we? But anyway,
but anyway, it's the question of the whole faith and work thing. It really was a surprise for me. In 97, I went down and I had become a Christian years prior to that. I was in college at this time and I was studying the Bible. And I went down to Miami in 1997 to study cities, right? And so I lived with a pastor in Little Havana, and he was the first person to tell me the Bible started with a garden.
Wow.
And it ends with a city. And, my views of Miami
Mm-hmm.
were very different than the way he saw the city of Miami, right?
Yes.
I grew up watching Miami Vice,
Mhm.
and that was the shows that I had seen. And, that paints a certain picture of Miami.
And I'm a
But
Dolphin fan, so that even
that's a whole other picture, right?
Yeah.
So, but he basically showed me the city in a way I'd never seen it before. And that was, through the eyes of scripture,
Mhm.
and that there was a robust theology around cities. I found out later that this same man had mentored many of the men that I looked up to and had been really leaders in my life, people that I had kind of admired from a distance, maybe read their books, one of them being Tim Keller.
Mhm.
And later on, in 2011, I had moved to Miami with my wife and our kids. I'd been serving as a pastor there, but I always had the dream in the back of my head since that time
Mhm.
that I would be invested more in the downtown area. So
Gotcha.
we actually got invited to go and plant a church in the financial district there. And I went up in 2011, studied with Tim Keller about church planting.
Mhm.
And, I'm not sure Tim puts it this way, but one of the things that I picked up on over time was for him, he coming into New York started asking a lot of questions with people about God
Mhm.
and their faith. Because he ended up planting a church there in the late 80s. And as he was asking people about, God and their faith journeys, he realized that what was a huge part of everybody's life there was their work. In New York, people work 40 to 80 hours
Sure.
a week minimum,
Never
right?
sleep.
Never sleep there. And he started asking people, how does your faith connected to your work? How does being on Wall Street, how does being a doctor, how does being creative, an artist, whatever, how is that connected back to your Christian faith, if they were Christian or whatever faith it was?
Mhm.
And he began to see that not only had much of the evangelical church kind of left the city, but also the church had not educated the congregants on how their faith is connected to their work.
Mhm.
Because there is a historic, robust faith,
Sure.
a theology around that issue.
Sure. So was it like more compartmentalized in terms of people not really seeing the connectiveness
Mhm,
that it could be
mhm.
because they're so accustomed to not seeing their work and the church out of the same lens, right?
Yeah, well, and
Yeah.
I think we made such a focus of the church being about getting people's souls saved, right?
Yeah.
Which is obviously,
Yeah.
as pastors and Christians, we are wanting to see people bend their knee to Jesus Christ as Lord and
Yes.
Savior. But the part that we miss was he's not only Savior,
Mhm.
but he is also Lord.
Mhm.
And he's Lord of all of our life.
Yes.
And he is the Lord who created us to work.
Yes.
And work in the Christian narrative is in the very beginning in Genesis, before the fall ever happens.
Mhm.
And it's into the future,
Yeah.
eternally, right?
Yes.
That we believe that exists, a very unique perspective on work in the
Mhm.
Christian faith.
Yeah.
And when I went up to New York in 2011, I got to study church planning. And at night, they have this thing called the Center for Faith and Work. And they had events all the time. And I was going to the events. I was meeting all kinds of people at these events. And I started asking the same questions that I'd heard Tim asking. So I was out
Mhm.
with a friend of mine, and one of the people we were with, they were a designer for Cole Haan shoes,
Okay.
and they were a Christian. And I started asking, how is your faith connected
Right.
to your fashion design work,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
And I began to think about it, and I began to read about it, and I realized, that God was the first fashion designer.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the way back in Genesis, he was the first fashion. And then I began to think about fashion theologically.
Mhm.
And it just opened me up to all these new ideas, so that when I went back to Miami to start our church was really built around 4 industries: the financial industry, the legal industry, the medical industry, and the sciences.
Wow.
And those are industries in many ways that I felt like there was a gap between the church and those industries.
Mm.
In many ways, people will say that about the arts, for example. There's a
Yeah.
gap between
Yeah.
the arts
Sure.
and the church. But there felt to me that there was a gap between the sciences, right? So like in the medical community, I started going to the hospital every other week for the whole day. And I would tell the medical students and the residents, the doctors, that I was there at the hospital, at this little cafe. Come by, I'll buy you a coffee, I'll buy you a meal, whatever it is. We'll hang out. And I just started asking them, what's it like for you to be a student, medical student here at Miami at Jackson Hospital? What's it like to be a resident, a doctor, whatever? And I discovered in that time that for people going through the training to become a healthcare professional, that this theme arose that it was very unhealthy.
Okay.
They had very little margin in their life.
Sure.
And then that there was also somewhat of a disconnect theologically between their faith and what they did in the operating room or what they did wherever it was. So we as a church began to say, how can we care for the medical community? I'm a pastor, but I also have a counseling degree. I'm a registered counselor now at this point in my life, but I started offering counseling services to the medical students in group settings, and doctors and fellows as well. And I began to speak at the university, and I began to speak a narrative of something we emphasize in Made to Flourish, the common good. The
common good, yeah.
How can we create a healthier process for you to become healthcare professionals?
Wow.
Because it's translated down, right? How we train people is how they're going to treat people.
If I can just kind of add on another caveat to that. Yeah. You're in an area being trained where there's lots of money. There are a lot of wealthy people, as you say, Wall Street, they're doing trading and so forth. And for you, that is very significant. The other side of that might be, how can we translate that to, say, people who may not be as affluent and are not living in a community where those kinds of markets are readily available? And really that kind of takes me to the next part of the question, which is the small business incubator project and program that we've been talking about, but you really helped begin that conversation through your church. And I'm just wondering if that might be a way that can pull others in who may not necessarily have the kind of economic whereabouts and status that others who are involved in business do. So talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, I think, one of the big issues for me that started happening is I got into the faith and work conversation. And then, getting more specifically into entrepreneurial type stuff, is I realized the work we do as church planners is entrepreneurial, right? And I didn't come from a lot of like financial resources to do that, but I had to go out and raise capital and do that kind of thing. And then this church in particular that we started in in West Palm Beach, is full of a lot of artists, baristas, people who did not have a lot of capital, right? And but as we started having conversations, realizing these people had gifts, they had talents, they just didn't know how to monetize them. But the needs that arose out of that were things like they didn't have enough music venues here in West Palm. Like live music is not something that was necessarily valued on a large scale. So we started trying to create alternative music venues, and we would do the marketing, we would put the shows together and everything, and pay them to perform. And we started getting traction with that. And then we started saying, well, how can we help these artists monetize their stuff? So we had, financial advisors or, accountants come in and do classes. We had this class called Economics for Entrepreneurs. The Downtown Development Authority partnered with us in this. And we did it in a restaurant, and they paid the tab for everybody's meals while they were there. And I still have people come up to me today thanking me for that class. Wow. That was probably 5-6 years ago. So we were doing that type of work. Made to Flourish had opened up in Miami. They had opened up in Fort Lauderdale, kind of year by year. And it was the third year, and they were looking at West Palm Beach. And some of the people I was connected with in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, had said, hey, there's a guy in West Palm Beach. He's doing this type of work. And so they approached me, and I told them what we were doing. They said, hey, we really see this as a really good fit for the kind of work we're doing. There's a real alignment here. Do you think there's anybody there that could partner with you?
Right.
And so I just thought, man, who better than Dr. Bird.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, because not only your openness to reach the city and love the city, but also the platform that you've created. I mean, you know, for many of these people, they may be watching or listening from other cities, but you know, here in West Palm Beach, you won't find a pastor more respected by the diversity of the church, denominationally, but also just you know, professionally. People in the city who know you as a professional here, as a professor, but also a pastor in this city. And it's been beautiful to see as we've worked together, the doors that have opened up in the city, and the pastors that have come, the people that have come and gotten connected with the work.
Yeah, that's to me one of the joys for me is our pastors' gatherings.
Yes.
So that when we gather with pastors and we can hear their stories, and I think that is something that I can truly appreciate, because it's not just one person out on an island. Because so often pastors feel isolated.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just doing my thing. But we have gatherings, and we really don't ask of them anything other than just show up, you know, and let's talk. And to me, that's been a very healthy thing for pastors.
Yeah, I remember one meal in particular that I think it kind of clicked this past semester. You know, we had identified the restaurant that you know, one of the other pastor's members had started, right?
Right.
And that was great food. So we all gathered there at that restaurant.
It was a Caribbean restaurant, wasn't it?
It was awesome, right? And so so we went there, and I remember we were reading through the book by Luke Bobo, right? And there was a chapter, and I can't remember the title of the chapter, but I remember we've been, you know, reading through it, and one of the pastors said, "Now, hey, I have a question I want to make sure we get to. So can I ask it now?" Right. And like, we hadn't even ordered, I don't think. And so I was like, oh my God.
And I think I remember the chapter. It was economic wisdom.
That's what it was.
Yes,
right.
Economic wisdom.
And so this may be something that other pastors are facing right now, but what had happened is this pastor in their neighborhood where they were, and the same thing's happening in conversations in the neighborhood I'm in, I'm sure it's happening in neighborhoods you're in, is developers coming along to churches and saying, "Hey, we're interested in your property."
Right.
Right. Are you willing to sell? Right. And I think in particular, some of the pastors at this table that meal, is they had felt that these developers, that some of them were trying to take advantage, right? Because of a lack of education and things like that. And Luke's book was bringing that issue to the table so that we could actually address this need, this issue, right? Again, economic wisdom, not just for the people out there in our congregations, but for us as pastors, right? It's something that's so neglected. It's not something we get trained on in seminary.
Exactly.
Right. So there's a whole need across the church. It's really a leveling of the playground in so many ways for us as pastors with our congregation. This is something we all learning together.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
And I think that when we've had these gatherings, we get a chance to hear the hearts of pastors and also the struggles that they are having within their own local congregations. And what I like about it is we've been doing it across denominations. So whether we're Baptist or Presbyterian or Methodist or whatever, we come together as pastors and say, look, we have a commonness that is so apparent in our lives. Now, the one thing that I appreciate about you is you introduced this whole idea of the small business incubator and what that can mean to a church. And I think you've mentioned a little bit about the artists in your church and so forth, but kind of elaborate just a little bit about the small business incubator.
Yeah. So like 6 months before COVID hit, right? We had been kind of playing with this idea. How do we love, the industries of our city? This needs was raising up in our church. We had a bunch of people in our church that had either started small businesses or were dreaming about that, or, we're kind of in the process of it. And so we had a woman at our church, she still goes, who was a major, getting her master's in business, international business at Palm Beach Atlantic, where you're a professor.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked her if she would have any interest in getting a small business incubator going at our church at Providencia, West Palm Beach. So we basically mapped out a curriculum for it, and we just put out feelers and said, hey, if you have tried to start a small business, if you have dreams of starting a small business, or you already have one, and you would like to come to a gathering, we're going to have this gathering, and we're going to try to figure out as a church how we can support you in your small business. So that was the opening invite. And that first meeting, you know, we had about 100 people in our church at that point. There was probably 15 people that came.
Okay.
The meeting was supposed to last an hour. We asked everybody to introduce themselves, say what they did for their small business or what their dream was, and then answer the question, what's their greatest pain point right now, as far as starting it, continuing it, growing it, whatever it was. That lasted for like 2 hours, and we had to shut it down.
Wow.
From that is where we developed our curriculum for the semester, and mapped everything out. And I'm hoping that this young man, he's probably my age, but I see him as like, so alive, like so young, because he's so alive right now.
Okay.
One of the guys who went through that small business incubator, his story is remarkable. Literally 3.5 years ago, he was homeless, coming off drug addiction.
Wow.
And somebody picked him up at a bus stop and brought him to our church. So he came to worship, and he hadn't been to church before. So it was like a new experience for him, a little weird, Yeah. And then he got into our community groups, and that was a little strange for him, but he stuck around. And then we had this small business incubator thing, and he went to that. And it was a catalyst for him to start thinking about his own career, thinking about his own calling, his own occupation. And 3.5 years later, he just sold his first $1 million home.
Wow. That's
so
awesome.
The story is like a homeless guy is now a realtor.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
To me, that is.
Yeah. You know what? That just tells me that that's true discipleship, because it's done in the context of the church, where he's able to get the word of God, while also getting these other resources of people. And so there's discipleship there. And I think that's great.
What a whole life.
A whole life.
Yeah.
The holistic, and so again, moving beyond not just saying that I'm saved.
Yes. Yeah.
But that God is concerned about not only the spirit, but also the body.
Yep.
And the mind.
That's right.
And so when we begin looking at that, then we really see the holistic approach to what this is doing. That's great. That's a great story. I think that if I recall, we did meet. We met at my church.
We did, yes.
And we asked several pastors. A number of pastors came, and we had members from their churches and our churches, and we all were able to kind of sit around and talk about the kind of small businesses. And it was amazing to me, the amount of creativity that was just in that room that day. So there is so much talent that is being gone unrecognized, and it's a well of potential that's right there. And I think a story like your member who actually went from drugs and poverty to being able to create wealth, I think that is just amazing.
And it pointed out to me, or it highlighted the need that, often we care for people in the spiritual space of, teaching them the word of God, starting a relationship with God. We provide community. But for many people, how do we empower them in their work? How do we empower them with, financial sustainability for their family? How do they learn something that's central to the scriptures, which is their calling, their work? What are they going to do? How are they going to serve the world? So I have more and more, it's become, almost undeniable how important this is, this
Yeah.
work is.
Yeah.
And a story that I love to tell is, or a point that I love to make is, the church is probably, as far as I know, the leading institution that is invested in the music industry.
Yeah.
I don't know of any other institution that puts on free concerts every week on a global
Right.
scale.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And I would say, specifically in the different communities, especially minority communities in this country, I'd say 95% of them learn music from their church.
Mhm.
So my question is, why can't we do that in other industries?
Absolutely.
Why can't we teach them finance, business skills, how money works? We were talking about this earlier, passive income.
Mm-hmm.
Empower our people in the industries of serving the world.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I think that's so important. And I think that maybe, and I'm certain that that's where we have missed it for many years, because most of the time when people come to church, it's simply I want to come to get fed, but the focus is usually on the pastor. There are officers in the church and ushers or things like that, but and the praise team and choirs, but very little focus is on what do you do during the week. And so, I actually quoted, worship doesn't stop on Sunday because, and I want the listeners and our viewers to hear that, because your work is valuable. Your work is valuable. What you do is important, just as what we do as pastors is important. And we don't want to belittle the work that you're doing. We want to highlight it and let you know that we care about the work you do. And we want you to be able to live out that as a way of connecting with not only others, but with God. So yeah, that is so important. Now, this small business incubator, I want to continue to kind of stay there for just a minute, because I think when we got involved, at least I got involved with Made to Flourish, one of the things that was attractive to me was this kind of paradigm shift in the way that church is viewed, that we see church more than just Sunday, but we see church as a Monday, a week. Throughout the week, we're doing church through our jobs. But then the incubator program that you kind of began to emphasize for Made to Flourish, do you see this as something that Made to Flourish is going to, we can take hold of for the whole Made to Flourish effort and endeavor?
Yeah, I think that, Made to Flourish is, they really let people contextualize the work for every city. But I definitely think the project that, we're doing here, we're not the only ones who've done it. Other churches are doing it around the country, but I definitely think it's something that's, easily replicable at other churches.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're doing at Providencia, West Palm Beach, what we've done, we're in the process of relaunching it right now because of COVID. It kind of puts things on pause, but what we're doing, we share freely with any church that wants to know how to do it, and we try to make it as easy as possible for them to start their own small business incubator. And really, each church can make it look however they want it to look. But one of the things that I learned, in the whole faith and work conversation was, for me, I started going to the industries to care for the industry leaders. So I went to the hospitals to care for the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the courthouses to care for the lawyers and the judges.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the banking centers to care for the finance people, right? So in the same way, how does the church, this is what I've been doing here, go to the artists, go to those who want to start small business, the entrepreneurs? And we're saying, hey, as a church, we want to love you. We want to care for you.
Yeah. For me, the very fact that we value what our members are doing throughout the week, that's important, I believe. And it really empowers them and also gives them a sense of that they matter, the somebodyness. And so I think that anytime that we can help people to feel good about themselves, then we're doing a great service. And I think something to be applauded, um, and something that we should not be ashamed to do. We should encourage that kind of affirmation.
Yeah, honoring the dignity of all work. You know,
Yeah.
the story that I've heard told and um, kind of passed down is that for my kids this morning to have a bowl of cereal and to have, milk in their cereal. There was a farmer,
Hmm.
there was a production company somewhere or processing company. There was a truck driver probably somewhere in there. There was marketing people. There was accounting people. There was people stocking the groceries on the shelves. There was inventors who figured out how to keep milk cold and,
Yeah.
all these things to bring milk to my table
Yeah.
to nourish my children.
Mhm.
And what we have failed in the church to help people see is that all of those people, whether they know it or not, are a part of God loving His creation,
Absolutely.
and God loving His people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
we're just turning the light on that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
helping people see it, that
Yeah.
it's not just for them to feel that they matter, which they do, but it's to show you actually really do matter.
Yeah.
Like your
Yeah.
work without it, if we take your industry or your role out of the equation, the system, the ecosystem
Yeah.
falls apart.
Yeah, and that gets back to what Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used to talk about, the beloved community, the interrelatedness, or
Yes.
what he would call the world house. That we are all it's dependency and interdependency
Yes.
on one another. And I think maybe if we emphasize this enough, we really are living out the true koinonia of God, that the family of God working together, and working together not just in the context of church, but in the context of the global world, of the world.
Amen.
So that to me is a very important part of what we do. I'm fascinated by some of the work that Tom Nelson, who is the president of Made to Flourish, what he's been doing in much of his writing, and some of the themes that he's been talking about. Recently, he just published a book, The Flourishing Pastor. And I think this is a book that every pastor should take hold of and read, because there are some ideas that Tom Nelson has put forward that can be of tremendous blessing to pastors. And one distinction that he is very clear about is that when we talk about the integration of faith and works, we're not talking about prosperity gospel preaching. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about not just the pastor becoming prosperous. We're really talking about the family of God being able to flourish in what God has gifted them to do. I don't know if you want to speak to that as well.
Yeah. And I just say, the book is, we get to spend time with Tom, and it's such a gift. And, it was a gift before COVID, but I would just say even during COVID more, that book is a timely book for
Yes.
pastors, because most pastors, the last thing they're thinking about right now is flourishing.
Yes.
Most of them are thinking about survival.
Yeah.
And I would just say that Tom's words are a balm to the soul, and
sure.
they're so helpful for pastors right now.
Yeah.
But I think that that movement of moving pastors into that framework of really thinking about flourishing. What does it mean to live a life that's flourishing, and getting away from what I would call a very shallow landing spot that some pastors have landed on with the prosperity gospel. It's very shallow.
Yeah, it's right. Yeah,
it's very materialistic. It's
Right.
very just money driven.
Yeah.
But for a flourishing pastor, part of that for me has become, man, getting to spend time with my kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Getting to spend time with my wife, taking care of myself, my
Yes.
health.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
these are things that pastors historically, we have not done
Not
such
done
a
a
good
good
job
job.
of,
No.
right? But I can tell you that I wake up in the morning excited to go to work, excited to go to our church. I'm excited about the conversations I'm having with our staff, the work that our staff is doing. I'm excited about the people in our congregation, the ways that they are waking up to this conversation,
Yeah.
how it's impacting their day to day,
Yeah.
their work. I'm not a guy who's out there trying to just attract a bunch of people to a Sunday night event or a Sunday morning event,
Yeah.
but I'm out there empowering people for Monday to Saturday.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they're taking these principles and these biblical ideas, applying them to their lives, and they're seeing real change happen
Yeah.
and transformation.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. You know, we always talk about this in Made to Flourish that God gave Adam a job before he gave him a wife. So, take care of this.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
when we start appreciating the value of the work and how the work is related to our faith and our mission,
Mhm.
I think it really speaks a lot about the direction that we're going in. And I think it's a
Yeah.
good direction. I love what we're doing. And I don't want people to think that we're against prosperity. We're not against prosperity.
Yeah.
But we believe that prosperity is more than material.
Yep.
We believe prosperity is the spiritual wholeness,
Yes.
the spiritual formation that
Mhm.
happens when we
Yeah.
have a relationship with God
Yeah.
and that we appreciate the gifts that God has given us to
Yeah.
be able to sustain life. If we're so busy trying to become celebrities, he talked about the green room pastors, right? So we have to be careful that we are indeed pastoring with an emphasis on the flock, on the people. And that's what I believe this flourishing does. It says, let's direct the attention to appreciate what work our congregants are doing.
Oh yeah. I
Yeah.
mean that the celebrity life in general
Yeah.
is an exhausting life.
It's hard life.
It is an
Yeah.
exhausting life, and it's a shallow
It
one
is,
too, right?
Yes.
And I think the work that Tom has done to present a different path forward
Yeah.
is very compelling, and it is so much more fulfilling.
Yes.
And I think that's what I think about that word flourishing.
Yeah.
I think about expanding it just beyond, like, prosperity is really kind of like the financial piece. You see, like, the materialism really emphasized, right?
Yeah.
But for flourishing, for me, it is finance is a piece that we have to be able to sustain life for our family and everything. But to be connected to my kids,
Yeah.
to be connected to my wife,
Yeah.
to be connected to my church.
Yeah.
I can say that I'm a part of a church that cares for me,
Yeah.
that I am pastored and cared for by people
Yeah.
in my church.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I'm not doing it alone. I don't have
Sure.
to do it alone. I'm not on track to be a celebrity, or a lone ranger. But it's so much more, because it's so much more fulfilling to actually do this work together.
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, most pastors are not thinking about flourishing; they're thinking about surviving.
Yeah.
And I would say Tom's book is so helpful
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
in this space.
And I think we are blessed to be able to be a part of this kind of a team,
Yeah.
this family,
Yep.
and so we are grateful for that. Now, part of this work, of course, has to do with Made to Flourish,
Mhm.
and I was thinking, I know this integration of faith and work is important, and but this emphasis on the incubator project,
Mhm.
how do you think Made to Flourish is working or will work with this concept?
Yeah, I think each Made to Flourish is really good with letting the city network leaders, the pastors in these different cities across the country, kind of contextualize things for
Mhm.
their city.
Mhm.
And in many ways, we've tried to do that here with the small business incubator. Is this a fit or not? Right? Does this work
Right.
for your congregation or not?
Right.
So we don't want to force it, but the way we've tried to create it is that it's easily replicable. It's very easy to share with other people. It's free,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I've tried to emphasize to pastors is, listen, for 2,000 years, the church has invested in the music industry probably more than any other institution on the planet, right?
Yeah.
We do free concerts globally every Sunday,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so the amount of
Some
investment,
are good.
yeah, some are good.
Some are good.
But you
Yeah.
think about, people, leaders in the music industry today. I mean, so many of them
Yeah.
got their start in the church,
In the church.
in the
Yeah.
choir,
Yeah.
playing piano, whatever it was. Like
Mhm.
the people I listen to on my record player,
Mhm.
they
Yeah.
are people who started in the church. I
Yeah.
mean, and it's such a diversity of voices. So, can the church do that in other industries?
Mhm.
Can we be invested in the financial or the economic health
Yeah.
of our church? I mean, of
Sure.
our city as well. I think we can.
Yeah.
And we have the people sitting in our pews that know way more about
Mhm.
business.
Mhm.
Talk about empowering the pew, right?
Sure.
Empowering the people in the congregation. They can help us. They can lead
Sure.
us. They can lead our congregation.
Yeah.
Lead us
Yeah.
in how we can do that.
Yeah. And that's why it's important that we share with our audience, that we're bringing in people that can help you do what we're talking about, which is use your gifts.
Mhm.
Some of you in entrepreneurial areas or small business incubator.
Yeah.
We want to be there to encourage and to inspire you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to give resources, whatever resources we have.
Yeah.
Made to Flourish, gives free resources to any
Yeah.
pastor.
Yeah.
And I think to congregants too,
Yeah.
that sign up on their website. They send you books, free
Yeah.
literature.
Yeah.
The Common Good Conference that happens every year. These are like, I go to them and I walk away inspired. I walk away,
Yeah.
really with new ideas,
Yeah.
right? Things open up for me.
Well, I'm so happy to have had you here on this show because I think what you have shared helps our audience to really appreciate what it is to see faith integrated into the work that they do. And so we want you, our audience, to know that you have the power to be whatever God has called you to be. And it is important that you're willing to be connected, creative, and courageous in your pursuit of flourishing, of being made whole. So thank you for joining us today, and let's continue to show what it means to have the power to be what God wants us to be. Thank you.